Okay, welcome back. It's a pleasure to introduce you to this third lecture of this morning by Dr. Philippe Aigrain. Philippe Aigrain started as a computer scientist, and then he moved for a few years in Brussels as an officer in the European Commission, overseeing research on software projects. After his period at the European Commission, he went back to France, to Paris, where he was a software entrepreneur with a software company called Software Space. And then at the same time, he was also more and more involved in digital rights. So he co-founded the La Quadrature du Net, which is the most important digital rights association in Europe. To some extent similar to the Electronic Frontier Foundation in the US, of course with a focus on Europe. And there's also many other things. He's not only a computer scientist or an activist or an intellectual, so it's a great pleasure to introduce you to you and for the topic of attention diversity and many. Thank you. Welcome back.
Thank you, Carlos. Buongiorno a tutti e tutti. Parlerò in inglese, ma se è meglio per lei potete fare domande in italiano anche, ma forse è meglio per le registrazioni se in inglese. As Juan Carlos hinted, I'm no longer today what one would call a researcher. That is, I have to go back to my past to revisit research that I have done. Nonetheless, I believe there is some teachings that are different today than before this research. So today I'm going to speak to you about something that started for me 10 years ago. 10 years ago in Chicago, there was the 10th anniversary conference of First Monday. First Monday is an online journal on the internet and about the internet. And it was one of the first peer-reviewed open access journals and it's not per chance that this was a journal on internet studies. And in this conference, the topic of the conference was can we make an open culture sustainable? Open meaning shared, open access and freely shareable culture. And most talks discuss things like can you have business model, an economy of culture that is freely shared or whatever. But I decided at the time to focus on what could be internal challenges to a freely shared culture. So at the time, I raised two questions. One question, which is the title of this talk of today, which is if you have a set of works, and let's forget how we delineate this set of works, what is a work and everything, but you have a set of contents in some medium or of some nature distributed in some manner, and then you can ask yourself how much is the attention of people to these works concentrated on a small number of them, or how much is it more spread over a variety of them. Now, as I speak, you will see that there are more questions than certainties in anything I'm going to tell you today, because, for example, what is attention? For people who think only about business models, attention is sales or revenues. for other people, attention is access to the works. For other people, attention is doing something with the work after having accessed it. For example, simply recommending it to others. So all the concepts I'm going to put on the table today, they are things that are often taken for granted, but when you start looking at them, you realize that in reality their apparent simplicity is deceiving, and that you have to revisit them. And let's say, I do believe that 3 years from now we won't remember any of the technical details of what I'm going to talk about, but what I would like you to remember as engineers, I don't know in which domains of engineering you are, what I would like you to remember is that apparently simple problems, when you put them in a wider context of questioning, they actually become not so simple problems. They become very complex issues that require multidisciplinary thinking to be addressed. And this is a teaching that justifies, in a way, the existence of an organization such as Nexa. And so I believe I have good examples. Then, apart from this question on how much attention is diverse, there was a second question that I raised in 2006, which was what is the balance between reading and writing with, in various media? Reading can be listening, viewing, can be navigating through some hypermedia content, but what is the balance between receiving, perceiving contents and producing them? And this question started to emerge because with the development of the web, many media which had escaped literacy, that is, media were, for example, moving image, basically, even when there were already tens of millions of camcorders, people considered that moving image was produced only by professionals doing films or documentaries or TV shows, and even though there were already the technical apparatus to shoot movies were already in the hands of people. With the web and with the development of devices, this changed completely, and everybody could produce and did produce contents in various media with new formats, like, for example, short formats for video, brief format for video, or remix for music. And at that time, some classical cultural studies scholars started saying that we were living in an era of expressivism, that is, everybody was writing, but people were no longer reading and no longer paying attention. So this second, which is something which I will challenge, but this was a very strong discourse, and it justified maintaining some scarcity of works in some domains to prevent, they say, to keep attention concentrated. So the two questions are very much connected. Attention diversity and symmetry or balance between reading and writing.
And if I can make just a quick comment, there are your 2 points. I'm very interested in how to apply them in the specific field of science. Attention in science and the balance between time allocated to expressing and time allocated
This is very good comment. Never entered my mind to apply into science. Maybe because I was too immersed in science. But you will see for the second question where I have not much empirical data to offer, but I do believe that there are self-balancing phenomena that are at play that prevent people from only writing. That is, and of course in science it is obvious that if you only write and you never read scientific publications, it's unlikely that your papers will be ever accepted. But in other domains it's less obvious, but it's also at play. So what I'm going to do is just state what the issues are, and then I will spend some time, and by the way you can interrupt, I mean we are not many people here, you can interrupt at any time, we can discuss, because many of the statements I'm going to do, they are a bit contentious, I mean they can be the object of a controversy, so please move in and ask whether really what I'm saying can be accepted or not. So after that I will move to attention diversity, and this is where I conducted or what is called meta-studies. It is basically I did collect some data, but mostly I used data collected by others, and I produced new analysis of this data, and also I analyzed what other people had done when they were studying attention diversity in their own studies. So that's the meta-study aspect when you write a paper, putting together the findings of other researchers. Then I will move quickly to the balance between reading and writing, and then I will conclude by highlighting the need for more work on these topics. So you have already seen that. Just a point, when you speak about the balance between, for both questions, for diversity of attention and for balance between reading and writing, in the question there are two questions. One is, how is it now? That is, how is attention diverse in various, and the second question is more normative. What would be a desirable state of the balance between reading and writing, or attention diversity? And of course, the normative question requires another type of a discussion. So, why is it difficult to study diversity of attention to works? First of all, work is ill-defined. What is a work? Because what is a work was defined mostly by copyright and author rights. And let's say we can say that their definition is the work is the embodiment of some form of action by creative people, which can be the object of a separate exploitation in the cultural and economic domain. But in our time, many things do not fit in that, either because there is a much more collective process of production of the work, and not in the sense, for example, that a collection of articles is a collective work, but in the sense that really inside the work it may be very difficult to characterize who has produced what. But even more, you have work that are permanently unfinished, which are not just like serials, but even though the registration numbers for cultural works have tried, for example, in France we have a legal deposit for the web, which is not really a legal deposit because actually it's a voluntary collection and voluntary submission of works. That is, the National Library selects blogs that they want to collect and blogs or sites. And at the same time, people who produce a site can submit it and say, I would like my blog or site to be collected. And when they do that, they give an ISSN number, which is the number for a periodical. That is, they consider a site as a form of variable periodicity production. But this is not really capturing what many of the sites, for example, the literary or artistic sites are, because content do not only appear one after the other, they also disappear, they also are changed in time. So work ready, you see, it's not such an easy concept. And if you ask yourself, should I measure the attention to an individual post in a blog or to the blog overall? There is no immediate obvious answer.
And so you said the National Library does that? National Library? National Library.
National Library for text contents, and the National Institute for Audiovisual is collecting actually the text contents of audiovisual producers. There is no, but there is also a legal deposit of movies. And let's not enter into that. The second question is, you said, I said when I asked what is attention diversity, I said among a set of works. This set of works is the universe we are going to study. But what is the universe of that is relevant to study? The answer to that, in what I call the era of cultural industries, was quite obvious. You know, there were, I don't know, 6,000 LPs published in one given country. Each of them was the object of registration for copyright purposes, or simply a numbering or whatever. But and all the rest, that is all the music that people were playing, composing, that did not go into published albums. This was outside the universe that would be the focus of analysis. Today, you no longer can consider things like that, because basically what happened at the time of cultural industries, that is, the cultural industries were gatekeepers that would decide whether a work would be distributed to the public, and an artist who was, for example, not signed with a label in music would, of course, could have listeners in concerts or whatever, but would not be able to reach a public outside of by alternative channels. This changed a lot progressively with bootlegs, cassettes that were recordings of concerts, or it changed also in countries that are, for example, in Middle East countries, much of the music of the Middle East, which was often not well considered by the governments or the churches, was distributed by alternative channels. But in general, today, most likely we are not going to accept that for example, if you study music, it would be only the 1500 albums that are published by the 4 majors or 3 majors in France, for example, in a country like France. Nobody would accept that because there are many other forms of dissemination of music on the internet, and what you want is to study a bigger universe. Now, diversity. Cultural diversity has been a main focus in international policy. There is a convention on the protection of cultural diversity in UNESCO. There is, and there are many definitions of what is cultural diversity. It can be linguistic diversity, how much content is there in various languages. Are there languages that do not make it in the word culture? But it can be also diversity in the type of contents. That is it can be diversity in the sources of content. For example, Ted Turner, founder of CNN, he declared once that that in the US there were 300 TV channels, that is 10s of times more than before, but actually the cultural diversity had decreased because all these channels were using formats that were produced by a very small number of organizations. So you can have many sources, but all the content is the same, let's say, or formatted in the same manner. All this is very interesting, but it requires qualitative judgment. You can, this defeats, or at least makes very difficult to study empirically the diversity. So I made the painful decision of considering that we would study just attention diversity in the sense which content is accessed, recommended, reused, because these are things that you can measure. I'm not studying linguistic diversity, I'm not studying the diversity of types of contents or quality, or I will make no judgment on quality of contents. That is, I consider that if a number of people are spending time receiving a sort of content, they find some quality in it. So I have a kind of democratic understanding of quality, which of course is probably only a represent part of myself. I have another part of myself who has very definite judgment of what is crap and what is interesting. But when you study empirically diversity of attention, you need to state clearly your hypothesis. I already mentioned the various forms of attention. Now we have problem with data, because data, in the past 40 years, there was an enormous decrease in the interest for non-economic data. In the 60s and 70s, there were, for example, large time budget studies conducted in both the socialist countries and the capitalist countries, where many things were studied that had nothing to do with the economy. How many that didn't give rise to transaction. Today, even if you look at the studies that are done at European level to understand cultural practices, you will see that, for example, how much time people spend sorting, classing their photographs. This does not exist in the statistics. even though we all know that it's awfully time consuming, and we see people getting mad at how complex it is to do it in a satisfactory manner, but nonetheless, it's not there because this generates only very indirectly through storage devices any form of cultural or economic transaction. And even worse, the data is not just about economic activities, but it's collected only by the economic players themselves. For example, in most of continental Europe we have collecting societies, but the collecting societies will tell you lots of things about how much money they have redistributed to artists and how wonderful it is. They will tell you who are the 100 artists that received most money. Many of them are dead, so it's their heirs that receive it. But they will not tell you what is the shape of the distribution. They will not tell you how much the distribution of income is concentrated or is flattered. And in the debate on the governance of collecting societies, we were a number of people asking for this anonymous curve. We don't care who it is, just knowing the curve. This was something, we wanted two things. We wanted to know the distribution and to know how much money goes to people who have acquired copyright but are not artists, how much money goes to heirs of deceased artists, and how much goes to living artists. And these two things, they are the thing the collecting societies do not want anybody to know. So there is information about that, but this is information that was obtained by a journalist who got the chair of the collecting society drunk in some festival and got something like, there are 5% of our members that get more than this, and so you have only very imperfect data.
Which can be astonishing, considering that there are either monopolies or oligopolies, typically by law. In Italy, it's a monopoly by law, so actually they should be required to provide that kind of data by law.
Actually, there are, in a country like France, where there are private clubs, but they are de facto monopolies. They are required by law to publish many short films, and there is even a commission called SPRD, Commission on the Societies of Collection and Repartition of. The key, let's say, in cultural policy terms, the key data is not there. Now, another thing is the cultural sphere is heavily polluted. In particular, peer-to-peer file sharing is polluted by fakes. Fakes are contents that pretend to be something, but in reality they are looping on some samples, or they are sending you to some porn sites or whatever. And actually there was one of the firm, Media Defender. It's a firm that is selling fake introduction to media producers. They had on the site a porn business, and they did a dual business, that is, they would do fake, but fakes that would send the people to their other business. But they were called red-handed doing that. But they, in general, in these fakes, they are terribly difficult, because what's happening is you have sort of a real curve, and then you add another curve, but this other curve is made of things people believed to be some other content. And when you add the two, it's becomes very difficult to analyze. And finally, you have something, are there any probabilists or statisticians here? Not just engineers, but let's say you probably have been told many things where when you learn probably statistics or that anything that is discrete is the discretization of some underlying continuous process. But not so. That is, culturists. People are inherently discrete. That is, for example, if you think distribution of attention to people, I mean, you do not have attention to a tenth of a person. And inherently discrete things have properties that, for example, they are much harder to normalize for size than really continuous things, where you just find out, you just compute the sum of the law and you normalize by that and by some moment. And another challenge, but we'll come back to that later. Now, despite all these difficulties, we have to do something if you want to publish in articles and books. So, basically, choose a universe. If possible, you would like to choose something which is one medium because there are specific constraints on media that make them very different one from the other. It's not at all. For example, you can see that in peer-to-peer file sharing, the eDonkey mule type of peer-to-peer were used mostly for music, and then when they become feasible to share massively movies and series, this went to other forms of peer-to-peer sharing like BitTorrent. So you try to focus on one medium, but of course if you study a peer-to-peer network, I mean, you can share anything on a peer-to-peer network, and so you will have a mix of media. It will be difficult. And now, it's not just media in the old sense of cultural industries, it's also media in the new sense of the internet. It's, blogs, media blogs, like Tumblr, or social media like Pinterest and stuff. Pinterest before it was good. Now you try, when you have chosen this universe, you struggle to get actually data. So there, for peer-to-peer, is sort of possible because it used to be that peer-to-peer was a public activity. That is, it was actually an activity in the public sphere. You offer some content for download when you upload it. And so you can study that, but in reality, it's in most cases the data was collected in agreement with the people who were managing some of the servers. Even in peer-to-peer, there are peering servers, and there are, but it's not true that everything happens between individuals. Of course, it was not true in Napster, where there was a central server indexing all content, but even in the more peer-to-peer things, there were people with servers, and there are data collector, great researchers who negotiated with these networks, the people operating, so they could get access to the data that is available at the server side. And, but of course, the people who ran the server, they were afraid that this could be used for repression, but even that this could be used to to focus future repression. For example, that understanding what content was most shared could be used to drive repression. So they forced the data collection to be strongly anonymous, not just on who was sharing, but also on what was shared. And for example, you cannot separate in this data. It's, by the way, it's terabytes of data. The data I studied on peer-to-peer sharing, it was 10 terabytes of raw data. So it's huge set. And each time you want to run something on it, it takes time. No? But you cannot discriminate between the data that was music. You have to use proxies like the size of the file or whatever to understand which data it is. And of course, you introduce noise. And then you try to analyze the data and you try to see if it fits some models that have been claimed to well represent how attention is distributed in culture. This was a question that is, it has been around since the 18th century when some curators of libraries started studying the access to books. And then it became really a focus of attention in the early 20th century, when people started studying the distribution of words in languages, and then to invent better stenography techniques. And then when a guy called Zip, which you will hear a lot about, Howard Zip was defined a law that he claimed applied to many things. Actually, it was a form of power law that was already the object of attention of Pareto when he was studying wealth. So you compare the data to these models, and then you start doing what is really the interesting stuff, is seeing if different media have different patterns, if different access modes are more prone to diversity of attention than others, if different business models are more prone to diversity of attention. And that is what is valuable from a cultural policy. Now, in general, that's where, when I use people, but I really don't want to use you now, even though lunch is already late, is if you want to study diversity of attention, you have to look at something which is called the cumulative distribution of attention. That is, what's happening is you have a curve, you have curves, all these four curves there, they represent here you're there, it's about 5% of 2 million words, and what it says is that about 92, that the 5% most popular works get about 92% of attention in this curve. And in this curve here, it's the down one, this 5% of attention, of the most popular words, sorry, they get 53% of attention. So this has been, this is synthetic curves. They are just made from a model with parameters. But these curves are actually observed in real life situation. That's why I gave them names that are suggesting, that are qualitative, let's say, and they, in reality, it looks like, they are all the same. The hits are the hits. Many people would tell you, on peer-to-peer networks, it's the same thing that in normal sales, the hits get more attention than the others. And of course, this is true. But we will see. Here. Why it really matters? These are not. The dawn curve is my analysis of 2 million works in eDonkey eMule. That is eDonkey when it adopted the eMule protocol. Peer-to-peer networks sharing in 2008, which was a time where it was used mostly to share music. And the other curve is the best guesstimate you can do of what was at the time the distribution of attention on iTunes, which at the time was the main seller of recorded music. And there were the same number of works. And what you see is that on the so-called iTunes curve, and of course Apple does not publish the curve, so this is something that was inferred from indirect evidence. But in iTunes, the works that are not in the two most popular works, but are in the 30% most popular work. Not in the 2% most popular, but in the 30% most popular works. They capture, in iTunes, they receive 10% of attention only. And on a peer-to-peer network, they receive 60% of attention. And why is it important? It's because these works, the works that are between 2% and 30% most popular, they are what Hervé Lecronier, a researcher in France, called the reservoir of cultural diversity. That is, enough people have already appreciated them, so you know that they are not total crap. And so they are the candidates to get more attention, let's say, of other people. So what is apparently the same, that is, the hits are the hits, in reality hides how much attention is left for something else than the hits. Now, when people started manipulating these curves and they are modeling as power laws, power laws are laws that are generated by a distribution with a power exponent. And they are, here I represent everything at zip law. That is a law where you plot the, you say, okay, the first work gets so much attention, the second work gets so much attention, and you try to model this curve using its cumulative distribution. When people started doing that, even the best researchers on internet studies, people like Clay Shirky or David Post, Clay Shirky is really is an independent researcher working for O'Reilly, and but he is really something with great insight into how the internet works. And David Post wrote a book called In Search of Jefferson Moose. But both of them, they bought some folklore that says, you know, it's the same thing for all sorts of phenomena. 20% of work get 80% of attention. And this is not true. This is one particular value of a parameter of a zip flow gives you that. But if you observe phenomena, you have an incredible variety of parameters. And so in the last slide, I have a reference to a paper on power laws and zip flow, and there you can find someone who has really analyzed what is the impact of parameters, how the parameters that are observed in nature. Because, for example, the zip flow explain the population of cities, or the distribution of wealth among individuals in a country, or the distribution of light in when you go away from the center of a star. So it's studied by hundreds of scientists in various fields, but nonetheless we got this idea of this folklore that here this is a study that is done by a researcher who works in Lucie Guibaud's research institute now, Bodo Balázs, but at the time he was working in Hungary and he studied BitTorrent. Hungary is wonderful because it's a country extremely homogeneous linguistically, and so you have specialized BitTorrent trackers that are specialized in Hungarian language subtitled movies. And he studied them, and he found it's very small because here it's only the movies that are in the IMDb database, Internet Movie Database, and so there are only 1,600 of them that are shared at the moment of his study. But he found that indeed the law was relatively as in the folklore. But in practice, this is a zip flow with a parameter close to 1. I don't want to give you equations of a zip flow. If you are curious, you look. But it's basically if you are at rank 1,000, and the parameter is 1, it means that the 1,000th most popular work will get 1,000 of the attention of the first one. And this is something you can observe sometimes in nature, but not at all. Then, in real life, you have parameters that go somewhere from 0.5 to 1.4 for cultural attention. And what happens is that the share of the 20%, let's say, wealthiest or most popular, can range to close to 1, from close to 1 to only 60%. Another thing which is painful is when a universe becomes greater, and that I think is easy to understand why. When there are more works with the same parameter, the share of the 2% most popular decreases. So now, I told you that the most extreme value I have observed in some cultural domains were 0.5, and that was for sharing of Creative Commons music in a site called Music.ly. So there were about 6,000 albums. It was a site organized by albums, not by tracks. And the 93% is what you see today on YouTube. For that is about 5% of the videos that are posted on YouTube get 93% of attention. This was actually published by Google itself recently. So you have an enormous difference. Some people say that when you have a curve that is what I call flat, a perfectly equal curve would give a straight line, an oblique straight line. That is, all works get the same attention, and so the cumulative distribution is a line. But people say that the reason for Musical.ly to have this very flat curve was because it was all crap. So you might as well listen to one thing than to another. And I'm not able to refute that statement, but I believe that in general, not open access, because YouTube in a way is open access in the strict sense. YouTube, anybody can access the videos, but contents that you can reuse also, they have much more diverse distribution. So I told you why it matters. It matters for real life cultural diversity. Now, what can we find as a lesson from that? There are great variations between diversity according to the modes of access. And the main factor is centralized or decentralized. Decentralized access, but access in skills where the contents are heavily distributed. For example, they are on each individual machine. The attention is much more diverse, and it is not only for content like rap, for example, that are not let's say that are marginal contents. Because if you look, for example, at there are forms of peer-to-peer sharing that are using, I think this changed name now and outdated, but a protocol called DC++ and DC Direct Connect. And Direct Connect was a protocol that used hubs. There is a form of server which is a hub, and they are closed. You enter only by cooptation by adhering to some rules. The rules can be, we want only that type of stuff, like unfindable movies from the 30s, or they can be no porn. And in DC++, you have content of high value, but nonetheless the diversity is very deep. In particular, because the people who go there, they are collectors. They want not just the most demanded thing. They want to get a wide collection, so they interest themselves. Now, there is a difference between open access and non-open access licenses, which is connected, in my opinion, mostly to the ability of redistributing oneself. Because if you can redistribute yourself, you can really recommend. And if you can recommend, then the democratic aspect of sharing plays its role. And funnily, I'm not sure I really understand, because people do recommend a lot YouTube videos. I mean, it's becoming a national, global sport to say, well, I'm listening to this, because YouTube is mostly a music platform in reality. It 70% of music access is through YouTube globally, but it's so-called video. It can be the score, it can be a still image, it can be really a film concert, but it's, even though you can recommend by simply linking, it makes a big difference on diversity if you can also send the film patch, not just recommend it. And I'm not entirely sure I understand why there is this difference. Now you have also differences that are sort of obvious to understand between business models. That is, models like based on advertising, even when they use schemes that pretend to not to have to concentrate attention. In reality, advertising works when you can concentrate the attention of many people on the same thing. So, which means that's why Google is pushing like hell the notion that each of you can have 2 million views for a video of a cat on YouTube, because that's how their model will work, even though YouTube is not profitable.
Is it not profitable?
It's not, well, in Google accounts, it's not profitable. I mean, it's unclear, but I think Google is a company that doesn't want to be, is profitable for the search engine, and their main aim is not to be profitable, it's to be the masters of the world. So it's hard to know really what is if it is really a business as we usually think, or whether it is a poor. Subscription is a model that is completely dual. If you have subscription to a distributor, for example, you can access all of, imagine you can access all of iTunes, which de facto is sort of true, because it's so easy to share between Mac users the iTunes content. If a distributor is driving the subscription, or like, for example, cards that are unlimited, give you unlimited entry in movie theaters. Don't know if they are there in one country, but they are big in France at least. This is very hostile to diversity, because people can will actually focus on the most popular movies rather than spreading. On the contrary, if you have a subscription either to a publisher or to an organization that shares some project of being interested in some given cultural approach, this is subscription becomes favorable. So I'm sorry, because there's lots of nuances, but unfortunately I would like to have a definite result saying this is bad, this is good, but it's a bit more complex than that. And then unit pay is actually less, if you sell tracks instead of albums in music, you have more concentration of attention. But that was sort of expected, and people, because that's due to radio. But the people hear always the same song, they want it. Now, you have things that can be really in the technical details. That is, you have in BitTorrent, you have things that are called indexers. They are just a catalog of links. And then you have trackers, which is something that is really deciding, managing the connection between users, between seeder and leechers, the people who give content for by upload, and people who and in some of them you have what is called ratio-based trackers, and they have a policy that is they will give more bandwidth to people who upload content which is highly demanded. This is very hostile to diversity, because of course diversity is based on uploading things that are not highly demanded. Finally, well, let's go quickly on that. You have variation between universes size. I showed you that there is natural variation. For example, there are people, you know, Chris Anderson made this theory of a long tail, saying that with time we would have a more diverse access to work, because the less popular or less recent works would receive more attention. And then there were researchers in Wharton who used Netflix access to movies to see if really that was happening, and they claimed that it was not happening because the share of the 5% most popular movies had actually not decreased. But the problem is, at the start point, there were 2,000 movies in the 5%. At the end, 2,000 movies in Netflix. At the end, there were 11,000 movies in Netflix. So in reality, 5% gives you much more diversity in the arrival situation. Diversity in the sense of accessing more diverse content. So you have to be very careful with universe size, because if really what you replace is a situation where you have access to only some contents, with another situation we have access to more different contents, it's naturally, even though the law will look it remaining the same, in practice the real perceived diversity by people will increase. And then, well, that's all. Now what's happening? As you know, the beauty of distributed provision of content with right of reuse was not fully appreciated by our policymakers, and they conducted a heavy war against sharing, unauthorized sharing of contents, but also they indirectly supported advertising-based business models. For example, in France, we consider a big success in having innovative startups is a company called Criteo that went on NASDAQ for providing targeted advertising technology. So there was really advertising business models are appealing for startups because they replace selling something little value to many people by selling big value to a very small number of people who have money. It's much better than selling little value to many people who are broke. So apparently, economically, it's appealing, but culturally, it's not appealing. But in practice, what we see is a dual world, a world where the major are still today, even in industries that claim to have been destroyed by piracy, the major companies make more money per album than they ever did, more profitability, but they do that on much less, their turnover has gone down because they do that on much smaller number of titles, and they do, to compensate for that, they do very short-term time cycle, like a month, with heavy promotion concentrated on a small number of titles at a given time. And that's true even in domains like books, which traditionally the attention was immensely more diverse than for other media. But there is not just the majors. You have all the indies and the small labels for music, all the independent firms of publishing. They struggle like hell to survive, but they produce the vast majority of titles. And they get a very small share of the total audience, but within that share, they organize a great distribution, a great diversity of attention. Now, I conclude on this element to have time to go quickly on the issue of symmetry or balance between reading and writing. What would be considered, there is a question that comes, in particular, if you start asking yourself, how should we reward the contributors to creative works according to audience, according to the attention their works get. And you have people who have said, the dogma is there should be a reward proportionally, and the reality was they are rewarded much more than proportionally. That is, a bestseller writer of a book will get up to 18% of the revenues tax deducted of the book, while the writer of even in fiction, writer of the newcomers in writing fiction will get at most 6% in reality. In practice, this is not what is written in contracts, it's a bit different. So some people, for example, Richard Stallman, started saying we should have a distribution that is not proportional, but he said we should be the cubic root of the audience. And well, when you start to look at what it would provide, you see that it is purely and simply impossible, because it would lead to remunerate so many works so far in the popularity curve that they would be really probably total crap, or even there wouldn't be enough works to be remunerated to spend a reasonable amount of money. So now there is another thing. You show curves of distribution of attention to people, and if you take a curve which is actually the curve of distribution of wealth in Brazil, one of the most unequal countries, for culture it looks pretty fine to people. The same, because in culture we accept that there will be works that will get much more attention than others. We consider even, maybe we will keep considering that it is also a condition of a shared culture, that there are some works that everybody can refer to, not just work of living artists, also works from the past. So just doesn't mean the same thing in distribution of attention and in distribution of wealth. So what could be, when I tried to design my mechanism for, my proposals for rewarding people who contribute to freely shared works, I came with things like power of 0.8 instead of cubic root, instead of 0.33. But of course, this is a pure policy issue. What is very interesting with power laws is that when you decide to reward according to a power law, like a cubic root, or basically what you do is you do, here is the real curve attention, and then I apply this reward law and I obtain another curve, which is, let's say, what I consider indirectly as the just curve for that it should be there. Now, why is it so difficult? Nobody has a clue of how the balance between reading and writing is evolving. Because basically we have statistics on reading of books, and just that because there is books and also newspapers, because these are the two big industries that have not lobbied for policy, receive great state aids in the case of newspapers, and obtain the laws that they want in the case of a publisher of books. But we know nothing, you know, people do not read less on the internet than they used to do before. They read more. That is, but in the large sense, I'm also viewing movies, listening to music, etc. But of course, there are time budget constraints, and there are things like moving from media to other media, whatever. What is clear is even people who claim that people read much less, based on how many people read books in a full format, even them have to recognize that people write much more than before. This is the guy called Olivier Donat, who does cultural studies periodically in France for statistical department of Ministry of Culture, and he has compared 20 years ago and I would say 4 or 5 years ago, and he came with the conclusion that there are about twice more people who write things that are distributed to anybody who cares to read them than they were before. So people are writing more, but then unfortunately reading and writing are not separate activities, and in many ways. But the first one is the one that everybody always forget, and I can't forget because I'm a writer, is you read your own stuff, but if possible with a critical eye. So this form of reading is totally ignored, but it is very important because it develops a form of reading which is a more attentive one than usual. But also reading and stuff from other writers, in the sense that when I say read, write, it's all media, it's not just text, is something that happens all the time, and the example of science is the best one. I mean, you read scientific paper not just because, not just your first year of PhD when you do your bibliography. You read it each time you write a paper, you go back to the articles, you see, and so it's extremely mixed activities, reading and writing. As I said, there is no really relevant data because it would require extremely fine-grained time budget studies, which would be pretty intrusive. It's not just a matter that they are complex to do. They would be very, I think, only the NSA knows really how much time people spend reading or writing. But what is clear, in my opinion, is that the expressivism theory, that is the fact nobody reads anymore because people are all busy writing their own stuff, and it was never validated. But it was neither was it refuted. It's just that we still don't know. What I conjectured in 2006, and what I finished at this stage so we have some time for interaction, is that is a kind of introspection, and we all know that introspection can really mislead you, but it's clear that if you don't pay attention to people, you're unlikely to get it from them. And in culture, it's very strong phenomenon. There was this debate on launch in 2003-4 by Michael Goldhaber, who coined the expression economy of attention, and Richard Bosch on the economy of attention. And basically they said, you know, the economy of attention is on one side you give attention to I don't know, stars, and you get illusory attention from them. Because you go to a concert and you have the feeling that the star is singing for you. But this is okay in a world of separation between people who write and people who read. But in a world where everybody reads and writes, in the read-write society of Lessing, this cannot work like that. And in the communities of practice of literary writing that I am involved in, it's clear that you have a balancing mechanism that is, you have to give attention, because if you don't, you cannot write anything meaningful. But of course, first of all, to write things that are literary works that are meaningful, the first thing you need to do is to live, which is not the easiest task in our world, but that is to live in the world, to have interaction with people, whatever. But you know, at a more technical level, the same people who say, you know, I write because it's such a strong impetus that I could not live without doing it, and I do it for myself, and I don't care if anybody reads me. The same guys, week after, they say, I stopped my blog because nobody is reading me, what is the purpose? And actually there is this complex, permanent negotiation between giving attention and receiving it, and to me it balances things, but how, I don't know. So I made this conjecture hoping it would be refuted, refined or whatever, that basically we thought of allocate the same time to both activities. But of course, I mean, this is a guess, this is not something that anybody has found. But, and why does it work? It works because it takes much more time to write than to read. So if you write a blog post, it may take 10 or 20 more time than to read a blog post by someone else. So it means that you give with the same attention you pay to yourself, let's say, you can pay attention to a number of people that is greater than one. And now I stop there. I would love people to find artifacts to produce situations that would put this type of hypothesis to a test, but I have not been able to do it. So here, the first two papers are basically it's my first Monday paper, and then 6 years after I published a book where the same thing is much more developed, but only on diversity of attention. And this is the article on power laws, very pedagogical, with all the techniques, remarkable paper. If you want to, you will hear about power laws everywhere in the future. So even if you don't care about diversity of attention, it's worth looking at this paper.
Okay, many thanks. But before you ask any question or make a comment, let me say that the book that you mentioned, Sharing, is freely downloadable from the website you mentioned. So if you're interested in the book, you can buy it, of course, from Amsterdam University Press, but also download it. Any comment or question?
Yeah.
Curiosity, will you make the same assumptions with speaking and listening, or this is totally different?
No, because there you have a kind of this is a cruel question because I always interrupt people and consider generally as a poor listener. But you have a scarce space in speech among the group, while you do not have this scarcity on the internet. Many parallel processes can go on, and I think so. I would say speech, conversation is a different situation than access to culture. But
we do a lot of videos, so I mean, content can be also not written, but we have videos. We can produce videos or speeches we can produce, but also use this content.
It's I'm not sure I get the relation of the second point with the first one.
No, because actually so speaking and writing and speaking and listening, I see your point when we are in a physical space, but when we are in a different space, in the cyberspace, so it can be also activities that run in parallel, especially with the social media.
It's clear that on social media, it's different because we have disconnection between attention and real-time focus on the other. I think what the difference is asynchronous vs synchronous. When it's when it's synchronous, then the scarcity of speech is there. People cannot speak all at the same time, or it's a cacophony. While as soon as it is like on Twitter or in microblogging, or it becomes, and that I think is makes social media of a great value in contrast to social networks.
From the graphs that you showed on the diversity of attention, if I'm not wrong, this is a graph in which you showed that peer-to-peer file sharing, and there is the most people concentrate the most popular more people concentrate most popular content. Is it right?
No, no. Compared to, you mean peer-to-peer compared to other forms of thing?
Yeah.
No, no. It's more diverse.
Okay.
That is
More diverse.
attention is more spread.
Okay. Oh.
Okay.
Now-
in
now-
the
now I got the
other-
point.
I mean, I swear that if I had found the other way, I would have told it. But of course, I was motivated by a deep feeling that it would be like that when I conducted the research. But I was, my finding was that it was not as much like that, that is not as much more diverse than I expected. It's clear,
Yeah.
but it's definitely more. If you look at this, it's not. No longer. I think I can't move the cursor anymore. So I want to show the curve,
Okay.
Yeah, I want to see full screen. This one?
Yes.
Okay. So in this one, you can see that, let's say, there the 2% most popular work get something like 84%, while they get less than 20% in peer-to-peer. In iTunes, they get 4 times more share of the audience. It's huge differences, even though the parameter of the laws are not that different. But this is around 0.8 for peer-to-peer and 1.08 for. But these are laws that have completely non-linear consequences. It is you move the parameter a little bit and it changes a lot the concentration. And again, the issue is not preventing the bestsellers from being bestsellers. Even if you try, you won't be able to. It's making sure that they don't need to exclude all the rest of culture from their getting access to the public. I always reverse the notion of do people have access to work by saying do producers of works have access to the public.
Maybe the concentration phenomenon is linked to the tendency to prefer the sharing attitude to the being exception attitude. I mean, maybe even in peer-to-peer situations, maybe you look for that most important content, even if you have a more diverse offer. I was asking if you agree, if you think it is reasonable.
I agree. I agree, but I think this. Okay. I think there is something rooted in humans that they want to share experiences with others. I mean, I think football works only, at least among the part of the population, because of that. But I also believe the schemes that technical and business schemes have an enormous impact. Because if you take, for example, BitTorrent tracker, you have 100, at each time you see the 100 most shared contents. This has a self-amplifying effect on that is very strong. That is, when some title gets in the most demanded titles, it is heavily promoted by the scheme of access, and and the same is true for YouTube videos where are not peer-to-peer, and for petitions, for example.
Okay, I'm sorry, but there are flights to be taken both by Philippe Aigrain and Interdisciplinary, so thank you for attending this morning session. I'll see you at 2:30 for the first